Hey, my name is Matt and I make video games. So this is a scene that I made in around late 2018, early 2019, and I wanted to take you around a bit of this and show what this game actually is. I had some different videos in progress, but they were taking a bit too long to make. That seems I bit off a bit more than I could chew, so I thought this might be a nice palate cleanser to get something out there and just talk about this old project. So I apologize for any jump cuts that you might see because I'm still figuring out what I want to say. I tried to record a devlog for this several times and I kind of gave up on that a few years ago. So this might be, the encapsulation of all of that, and I'll try and cover it in as much detail as possible because I think this is a really cool project that I basically abandoned, for now at least. And this is coming off of sort of the post-burden of proof era. So, as you can see, it's a huge leap. It's a huge graphical leap from that. And there's a lot of reasons for that. One is that I got a new computer right after developing Burden of Proof, so I was able to handle a lot more geometry, a lot more vertices. I also redefined my workflow for this, so you'll notice like all of these cool PBR materials that's physically based rendering. They have like specular highlights and metallic properties, and this is something that you really didn't see in Burden of Proof because I just didn't use it. And this is also when I upgraded Unity. This is when they created nested prefabs for the first time, so I was able to simplify a lot of workflow stuff. And for this, I just really wanted to break away from what Burden of Proof was. It was challenging just to develop in the first place because of its the nature of it being a visual novel, and also from the graphics and character design and all that was really lacking, I felt, even at the time. So I did everything I could to improve and get better. See a character here. We'll get to more of that in a minute, but as you can see, it's definitely a big step up from what I was doing before, and it took a lot of practice to get to this point. So I guess I should talk about, like, what is this thing? So this is a park, what we're looking at, and it's not complete, so there's a bunch of holes and just like unfinished things that are just lying about, and you can see them very clearly from every angle, so don't mind that. But I did get a lot of work done on this, and this was not supposed to be what the game is. This was like a technical demo that I was creating just to showcase the combat and the controls and all that, and really just for myself to practice like 3D modeling and get better at that. And I guess I did, because this is like a world apart from what we saw in Burden of Proof. So again, all of that comes from the PBR workflow and all that sort of stuff, and the fact that I have a real reference for this. I think that made one of the biggest differences, is that I'm gonna make a real location and just replicate it in the game engine. So I'll show you that in a minute. As you see here in Google Maps, this is what I was basing it on. So all of these neat little objects and details and items and like scenery, it's all based on this little park in Tokyo. So of course Japan was the set piece for the game. Would have been the set piece. I think you'll find some props and items were reused in Shinogi Chess Club because it just made sense. Like these little pillar things. I think they're called bollards. Forgive me if I got that wrong. The sign, for example. So basically I just looked at the scene and said, what are the objects and how can I replicate them in 3D? And I didn't finish my process, but I got pretty far. You can see that lines up right to this. So for example, here you can see the signboard with all the different letters on them and these different things that they've put up along the side. I tried to replicate it. Obviously it's not completely accurate, but I did get really detailed with it. I got more detailed than you might expect, like the ground cover with these plants that are 3D objects. All this kind of foliage stuff definitely was new to me at the time. Basically applying leaf textures to the bushes and the trees. I think these are Unity trees, which are, I don't know, maybe not. They may be Blender trees. Oh, this is a Unity tree. So it's basically Unity's weird, like, build a tree system and use nodes to create it. Kind of neat, but I think it really hurts the performance because it considers a lot of stuff that it shouldn't have to. It's a little lopsided, I don't know. I have a different method for creating trees now, which is basically a plugin for Blender. And that might be what I used for some of the smaller ones. There are also some issues, like the fact that you can see the ambient occlusion through the leaves, or maybe that's a feature if it's translucent. But it was not intentional, I'll tell you that. You can see these like little light posts, and much like any artist, when you first discover bump maps, you just slap it on anything. So you get really bumpy and watery metal here. Nowadays I would probably tone that down. Oh yeah, the PBR glow, so this is the bloom effect in action. This is where I first used bloom, and now I use it everywhere. It is for these little floating neon signs, supposed to be like holograms. You'll notice that from Shinogi Chess Club a lot around the school. And also this rock asset itself is used in the courtyard. A lot of stuff carried over to that. And in that sense, I tried not to waste all of the props and stuff that I built for this, because it was really devastating to realize that I was aiming too far for this thing. And what the game actually was going to be is basically ascending through a tower and slowly taking out enemies using stealth mechanics and stuff like that. There was supposed to be about like 120 floors or something, and I don't know why I came up with that number, and I just realized like that's way too much. Like, it was supposed to be procedurally generated, but even then, building the props and creating different zones for all of the different regions of the tower just seemed impossible. And then I hit a performance issue where I couldn't load as many enemies as I wanted on each floor. And that came down to like the programming and stuff like that. So a lot of reasons why it fell apart. And after this, I moved on to Iron Reckoning, which also focused on combat, but was a bit more manageable because it was just linear. You go through levels, and I can more cleanly define like where things start and stop and not have to load everything all at once in one giant scene. Okay, so I guess I should just play the game. I haven't actually done this in a long time, so we'll see what state it's in. Oh, cutscene right away. See, there's a little glitch every time the camera moves, because I didn't iron out the curves yet. The animation curves. Here's some lore moments for you. And there's supposed to be something on the floor there that she's looking at, and it'll turn into a sort of investigation where you move towards something else in the city, and then it turns into a combat encounter and so on. So all of that was built just to show that the mechanics existed. Like, this isn't even the actual game. In some ways it's a prototype. So I've kind of moved away from that because I've been a little afraid of running into that same thing where you create something and it takes a lot of time. This took months and months to build by itself, and that wasn't even going to benefit the actual game. And it can be useful for like when you don't know what the mechanics are, but I feel like I kind of did. So I just try to make use of this demo whenever I can, because there's a lot of work put into it, and it'd be a shame to not use that, especially when it's so tough to create things from scratch. So there's a lot to take in here. First off, let me see if I can play that cutscene again. And there's an issue with Unity where the scale is not 1, so the pixels are not lined up correctly, and I can't seem to fix that. I can force it to 1 there, but it says live debugging. Unity is just continuously broken at every stage in different ways. Because they definitely fixed this in newer versions. Oh, sorry, the pixels will be a little aliased. So I'll play it again, but I'll use the time controls to change it to night. Because the cutscene is supposed to work at any time of day. And I think night was the intended goal for this thing. So you can see when it goes to night, the system adjusts the bloom on the windows. There's lighting on the transport ship as it's landing. And also just actual real-time lights turn on in the scene based on the time of day. Of course, it rotates the sun and it brings out a layer, a sphere layer. I'll just close this out and we can look at the cutscene while it's in progress. So this stuff that you see in the background, the clouds, it is just a sphere. So there were no fancy shader tricks or anything like that. And here's just all of the stars and stuff that appear, and then of course the moon, which is just an object that moves around the sphere. So all of that was basically coded from scratch, instead of being a skybox. This is the first time I used depth of field effects, so you can see it's really reined in there, like the ship is blurry as it leaves, and she's in focus. And that kind of stuff became a little too complicated to do for future projects at times, but it definitely adds a lot when I am able to put in the effort for it. And even here, like, the depth of field adds a whole lot to what would otherwise be just a shot of the plate. And it can even change over time, so that's done by just having a depth of field target object that kind of moves further or closer to the camera. And then of course the intensity can also be controlled dynamically, and I do that just by detecting another object that moves up or down if we were to look at the cutscene itself, like in the engine, we would just see like an object moving, and that represents like the strength of the depth of field effect. So that's how I'm able to control it with the animation tools that Unity provides, instead of creating like scripting events and stuff like that. So I think that about wraps it up for the cutscene. So as you can see, we're walking around. There's a sprint, of course. There's a crouch. There's also a prone. Must be space, right? The V is change camera. There's an aim mode. Oh, you hold C. So in this mode, you can crawl around. Of course, it's a stealth game. This looks a little weird. Let's see, the footstep effects are still active when that happens. I believe there's a little collider at our feet, and whenever it touches a specific surface, it'll spawn the particles and make a sound. So we can get a closer look at the nature objects here. It's not a whole lot, but it serves its purpose. A lot of these were hand painted, and I just kind of worked some textures in Photoshop, so there's no substance painter step or anything like that. These are just assets that I got from those free texture sites, or just painted it in myself, like with the cones. So one unfortunate thing is the limit of lights, and that means that you can't have too many real-time lights. So this stuff that should be emitting light is not, and this might be deferred rendering path. So the limit isn't as extreme as forward, but it can still get pretty bad. Unfortunately, that limit exists even today in Unity, and there's just no real way to get around it. You have to very carefully disable or enable lights, or use baked lighting, or anything like that. But of course that wouldn't fly for something that's real-time like this. So I can change the time with the press of a button. And a lot of little details I found were really cool, like, well, for one, the fact that I can turn the lights on at different times, so I can use smaller increments, and you'll see that the windows come on first, and then the park lights come on. And if I play it, it's supposed to move in real time like this. And I found this stuff really neat to work with, because it gives you the chance to like change the scenery a lot when you're working with it, and take lots of cool screenshots at different times of day, and add a lot of little details, like you can just barely hear the crickets chirping when night comes on. So there's a climbing mechanic. That's what it is. You can see she does it at different heights, so at that height there's nothing. At like waist height, she does that, and then at like head height, it's an even longer grab. It doesn't connect quite well to the geometry, but you get the point. So it should work on anything that has a collision mesh, and that's because it uses a series of raycast checks to figure out where it should climb and what height the climb is. Not sure if I have a debug line for that. You can kind of faintly see, like, when the climb starts, there's like three little lines that pop up. And those are detecting the different heights. So I guess every time you jump, it does that detection. makes the character enter a new mode and then cuts out all of the physics and just moves it along a spline path and stuff like that. There's also inverse kinematics for the feet to line up. I don't think it works quite well in this game, but there is an attempt. You can see on different levels there, it affects the idle animation. And you might notice that these are stairs, and stairs are notoriously tricky in games because you either have a collision mesh for each step or you add a ramp and then the feet don't match up. But I was able to find a really neat solution where the collision for the steps affect the inverse kinematics and then a ramp affects the regular character motion. So you get really clean up and down movement on these. Of course, that's important for a game being about ascending a tower. You'd have to go up a lot of steps, so that's how that works out. And then the feet use a raycast to detect each individual step and align the IK target position to that. Of course, it works in any situation, so you'll notice her feet like kind of breaking at certain points because it's not well done, but you can see that the angle is respected there when the foot rotates to that. One of the other videos that I was working on was trying to cover inverse kinematics in more detail and how I do that in my games. So definitely be on the lookout for that if I ever get around to it. I think this is a good summary though. One caveat of the IK is that it causes a lot of snapping. So you can see like the foot is kind of locked to the ground until it leaves. And then the IK just turns off, and that's really noticeable to me, so I definitely want to like address that if I was ever continuing this code, although I probably wouldn't because it's severely outdated at this point. The way to address that would be to kind of smoothly ramp off smoothly interpolate away from the on and off state in IK. So instead of just turning IK on and off, you can set a weight for how much it affects the pose. That definitely would have been useful here. I did this because I wanted to take a look at the character's face details. This character is called Lotus. She's an operative working for a special government force, essentially, taking out a rebel group that's occupied the tower that I was talking about. So, when you're idle, yes, you can see there's some random animations that stems from the head IK. So you can have just every so often it picks a target in a random direction, and then the head will turn to look at that. You can see she's looking a bit down now and then returns to normal. So it helps make her feel a lot more alive. Let me see if there's blinking. I guess there's not. Blinking would actually help a lot here to make her feel more alive. It's a trick I use in Shinogi Chess Club where you just have another animation layer over everything else that's happening and just run a blink on repeat. But of course it gets tricky when you need to turn that on or off, depending on the state of the character, because you wouldn't want it overriding all the time. There's a bit of specular highlight in the eyes, which I think is really cool. That comes out at night in certain circumstances. Or even here, I guess. It's reflecting this. That's probably the reflection probe, which basically just takes a screenshot of the scene and uses that as the base for reflection. So you'd call that a cube map in other situations. That handles it for basic controls just like this. The cloth simulation is just Unity's cloth sim, and it's not very good. But here, since it's very constrained, it kind of works on the hair and the little cape that she has. It does look a little silly as a design. It should probably have looked more like a scarf, but then who knows if that fits this aesthetic, and I don't know. Okay, so I figured out how to do it. I took a look at the code. C-spawn, test weapon, and something will happen there. So this is an item. Drops down. Oh yeah, and she looks at it too, to signify close by things that you can pick up. So press E, and then you've acquired it. And then this is what the item is. Let me see if there's a tab menu. So this is how you manage all of your equipment that you pick up. These are supposed to be the different categories. And then you've got different tabs that work in here. There's supposed to be like a Metal Gear Solid-esque call menu. So you click on the different characters that you want to call, and then you can call them and have conversations, and it would bring up little dialogue sequences. And then you can take a look at some of this lore here. All these different details about each of the characters. It's so much text that it has to condense down. Probably should have made a scroll. And then of course I tried to model a lot of properties about each item that you pick up. So there's lore for the weapon, there's a weight, and that'll affect how much you can carry. Different stats like the fire rate, the range, whether it's a lethal weapon or like a tranquilizer, then the manufacturer, suppressor status, it's all that kind of stuff. I can unequip it. Let's see, that takes it away from that. This is a character that is basically cloned from the main character anytime you open the menu, and then you get to rotate it because it's just existing also in the scene. Let me see if the light affects it. Kinda. So the lighting of the scene affects this because behind the scenes it's just another 3D model that's placed like underneath the level, and then a camera is rendering that with transparency for the background. So I can equip that. Should really update the model to show that it's there, but it is there. And then there must be like a holster button. Maybe not. Yeah, the number keys. So I've also activated some enemies. I think they're... Nope. They are active. So that's an example of dying. It activates a ragdoll, and then you drop all of your items. Use the tree as cover. So something really interesting is that their weapons use like little trail effects, so you can see where it ended up, and then it also creates little bullet holes on the walls, as you can see here. You might expect that this is really tough to do, and yes it is. There's a limit to them. Little decal objects, basically. Not even decals, probably just a flat plane that matches to the surface. But what I like is that it creates a sound to it as well. Little impact hits. And that'll change depending on the property of the surface. So that's done using physics materials, which is a feature in Unity where you can assign each collider a specific material so that it can be like concrete or stone or dirt. So that's how it detects the different materials for the footsteps and also for the rifle fire here. Okay, so if I hold down the attack button, I can get him into a grab and then move him around. This is not very well animated, but the idea is here. I think there's a button to kick. I think it's C. Kick his weapon out of his hand. So that's one action. And then from here it works kind of like Metal Gear Solid controls where you... What? Don't take that. Okay, yeah, so you hit a button, and then she does a move. That moves into the floor, and then his weapon drops, and then I can pick that up and use it. When I holster it, it goes into the rifle slot instead of that, and you can see it's here in our inventory. So now that he's knocked out, you can see we can do different things at this point. Like we can kick him, that wakes him up, put him back to sleep. There's no sound for that. Or we can carry him, so that just snaps him into a fireman's carry pose. And then you can do everything that you normally would, except for go prone. So you can bring them to different locations and that'll stop them from detecting. And this is important because otherwise they would find the body and track you down and stuff like that. So I thought it was pretty neat how well this worked just without anything else, but I guess it's not very realistic for him to just magnetically stick there. So I can hit Q, bring him down. And these pair animations where like she interacts with him are done in a special blend file where I animate two characters at once and then bring each one of their individual animations into Unity as separate assets, and then I play them back at the same time and just kind of hope that they line up. So it's not very secure, but it works for this. It's the same thing that happens when I do the takedown. So I've hit the takedown. That's one animation from behind. There's another one from the front. So depending on the angle that you approach him, you basically get different neat takedown animations. There might be one from the side. Yeah, I think that was a side one. So they're based on the CQC slams that Snake does. At this point he's detected me, but he can't do anything about it because he doesn't have a weapon, and he doesn't have punching mechanics like I do. So of course there's supposed to be many different like things that you could do. Probably hold them up if you aim the gun at them. Maybe different melee moves or like interrogations that you can do, stuff like that. And it was all supposed to be procedural because the tower itself is procedural. So they would have to react in a lot of different ways. There's an example of damage. It's like a react animation and you get a little hit marker when you connect. And each individual body part is kind of listed as its own collider that moves with his animation. So you get more precise shots. And then of course hitting the head results in a headshot. It does a lot more damage. At this point, you can still kick him, but he's not knocked out. So it doesn't do much, but he still behaves the same way as if he was knocked out. So there's different states that each guard can be in. We have a drone. So one thing you'll notice about that guy is he had a little react animation. Because he noticed me for the first time, and then he ran over to the nearest weapon and picked it up so that he can take an action and fight back. Yeah, So one thing that's neat about the drone is that you can shoot it down and it'll continue firing for a little bit. It's like a little personality thing that you have to stay clear of it. And there we go. Threat eliminated. Oh yeah. If you continuously kick him, he will get knocked out. He's really bad at detecting me. Nope, he got me. Okay. I guess my button activates all of them. There's supposed to be noise mechanics so that they can detect you even if their back is turned. Maybe it's for like the gun firing. But he already sees me. Yeah, so if the gun fires... But it adds a little bit to their detection meter. So one thing you'll note about this animation is that it also moves the gun slide and stuff like that. So little details like that. And for this gun, I believe you can see all the parts on it move to show that like the round is being exhausted, like it's being vented out, all the heat. And then when you reload, it gets into a different state. So the weapons and items also can animate according to these special reload or fire animations and stuff like that, which I think is pretty neat. Okay, so I've loaded up another enemy here, and I've acquired another one of the weapons I built, which is this tranquilizer dart. So it has a suppressor and it's marked blue to indicate that it's non-lethal. So if I hit him with it, you can see the dart sticks in and will eventually affect him, much like the Metal Gear mechanics. And the more darts that I put in, causes him to go to sleep faster. And this is a different state than being knocked out because it lasts much longer, and in general is a much better way to take them out. Of course, it won't work on the drone. Actually, I think it will. Got a precise aim. There's a little bit of variance in it. One of the one of the weird quirks of this system is that since the drone is also just an entity, it is also affected by the tranquilizer dart, and that wasn't supposed to be final, but I just thought it was pretty funny. I guess this is also something that you wouldn't expect from the drone, being able to carry it and move it around. And it's causing all sorts of errors in the project now, but that's fine. At some point it might cause brain damage. Oh yeah, he's done. So yeah, I think that's about it for this scene, so let's take it over to another level that shows some more gameplay maybe. So here we are in a different scene that I used to test the gameplay mechanics. One thing that's kind of neat is the screen space reflections that work on this surface. It's the first time I've used that in a game, I think. Just got an enemy up ahead. I'll just do the same thing. Bring him out of sight. Up in here. So this is where I tested out suppressor mechanics, so firing this one will slightly alert them, but firing this one will not because it's suppressed. I believe the sound is not quite accurate to how it's supposed to be. It's probably just a test. But the mechanics behind the sound should work. Here's the animation for when you're crouched and climbing. So it's also neat that you can basically go onto these like vertical segments and then have a top-down view on stuff. Not that you would ever be able to do this in a enclosed tower, I guess, but maybe it could have been neat. So at 2 shots, he turns around and I guess he's supposed to be upset by the fact that his friend died behind him, but they're not very smart. Must be the wind. That can bring them back. And then try more direct combat thing, so he starts shooting and that alerts him. It's not the most realistic system, but it works to get them all engaged in combat. Now they're going to continuously do that. I didn't get to the point of implementing anything further. Like, they really should be flanking and moving forward to try and get me if I'm just hiding behind here. After a certain point, they might give up. Oh, he was checking it out. Okay. Shows that I know. Completely forgot everything about how they work. Just completely missed me. And there we go. That collision. I like the fact that you can climb without using your hands. It's really having a tough time with that. Awesome. So now let's look at a scene I used for previewing the character design. Okay, so here we are, and I apologize if this has been a bit of a lengthy rant of me just like slowly talking about every little detail. I hope that's not a problem, but for those of you that are interested in the development process, I hope it's been insightful at least in how I do things and what this project was meant to be. I already gave a bit of backstory about how I broke away from burden of proof on designing this game. But I think it also just marked a really important point for me to kind of move beyond just what the idea of the game is and practice just getting better at 3D art and programming and all that sort of stuff. And on that note, the PBR workflow is something that I really invested a lot of time into. So you can see all of the cool little lighting details in the background. That's supposed to affect the reflections and the basically the ambient light of each part of the models that are in this scene. So that sounds obvious in today's terminology, in today's like technology stack, but I mean before 2018, because I take a while to catch up as an indie developer. You know, at a certain point, they didn't have this. They didn't have like reflections or ray tracing or anything like that. They just had diffuse shaders or different types of specular setups, and that would require you to change the materials based on the lighting environment of each scene. And to, in that respect, burden of proof utilize that a lot. I would just like tint materials a certain way because they just worked better for that scene in particular. And this was the first time I actually considered using the physically based properties to sort of drive how it looks based on any sort of lighting environment that you come across. So you can see it really pays off to have these like metallic maps and stuff like that, because the different components result in different lighting properties on each part of them. There is a lot of bump mapping, but you also get some pretty cool stuff like the reflectivity of this metal chest piece as opposed to the fabric of the shirt. And the same on the back here. You can see it working in different types of lighting setups, because now the background itself is lighting up the model. And that, at the time though, is also a pretty revolutionary technology, because it gives you a much more realistic preview of like what can happen when the model is in different situations. In a real scene, of course, you would hope to light it with the real-time lights, and everything would be dynamic. So this is just a good way to look at all of the different lighting situations that would happen for a character and make sure that the properties work. Okay, so to close this out, I want to look at the actual game that I was building with this, which is less further along than the park demo, but I think a really important piece of this whole thing. Okay, so here we are, and we're looking at basically the same skybox setup as in the demo scene, of course, but this is what the game actually would have been. So here are the floor layouts for each floor that's going to be populated into the building, and then here's the base of the building, and it's not textured yet, but you can pretty clearly see what the design is going to be and how this base layout of the floor would have to be replicated on each level going up. And the idea is that on each floor that gets generated, it'll pick from a random layout here, and then from that, it'll pick a random series of items to place in each room and in each hallway and stuff like that. So you can see that in this layout, it's filled with a whole bunch of these rooms that are along the side here. Each one of these rooms could be a different subtype based on the random seed generator, and then that'll determine the prop objects that go inside. Probably was a better way to do this, or maybe not. I don't know. This blue thing that you see at the bottom is the navigation mesh. So this is how AI characters can pick their targets on each part of the floor and like move around them based on the points that Unity gives me. And that'll become important because, as we'll see, they have patrol paths and they'll move around the floors randomly, and that's supposed to help with the immersion, and they're more responsive and more different based on each playthrough. So let's give it a run and see what happens. It might break. Okay, no. See if there it is. So generator. I think hitting some button will start. Yeah. So this is the process of creating it, and like my new computer can blast right through this and no problem. It used to take a good minute or two on my old computer. So every time you load up this scene, it would go through this process of populating the entire tower, and you could load it up from a save file and it would still go through this and just recreate the tower that it generated for you, because the seed will always result in the same tower being created. So if I continue, now we're at the base of it, and there's a lot of floors. Right now it looks all the same because there weren't many floor variations created yet. And of course the first floor is severely lacking here. Oh, you can't even ascend because when you get to the staircase, it just doesn't go anywhere. Hopefully you can see the idea. So I can take the camera. Actually, yeah, the floors won't even load in their objects until the character gets close to it for performance reasons. So let's take the character up there, and that'll just let me fly closer. You can see the floor loading in once I get there. This game might be a lot more viable today with today's computers, but at the time it was definitely ambitious. I see, so when there's nothing that it can pick for that room, it just kind of ends up with a one-sided wall. Don't know what's happening here. So this would be the game. You kind of go around, dramatic music would be playing. And some of the music you're hearing right now is from the game. I'm playing that in the edit, so it's not part of the project itself. You might recognize some instruments and themes that I was able to reuse for Shinogi Chess Club, and again, that goes towards not letting it go to waste. I really didn't have many prop objects. Filling out this area with props was probably the most daunting task. I'll see if I can find stairs. It's gotta be some... yeah, this. Okay. Nope. So, I think there are 3 stair positions that can happen on each floor. So you can ascend a stair and then have to go across the floor to find the next stair. So that's how it forces you to explore, rather than just heading up one single staircase. And I can't seem to find it, so I'll just... move my way up. You can see it once I get close to the wall, it detects that there's collision above me. And the IK also kicks in at some point with the feet. So I'm looking for a floor with enemies. So obviously as you get higher up, there's a greater chance for enemies to spawn. And you have to pick up your weapons along the way. The first floors might not have any enemies at all, just to make it easier to get you acquainted with the controls. Can't find anything out here. It might be broken. Send a lot of floors. Oh, there's one. Okay. So... So you can see, this is how the stealth mechanics would play out, because you'd encounter enemies on these floors and have to think carefully about how you engage them due to all these like interior corridors and stuff like that. Although it doesn't help when they just stare into a wall and don't notice you there. They really should be better prepared. You'd think that when a bullet goes through their leg, they would react. Okay, so here's a dangerous thing, because there's a group, and they are pretty accurate. They just don't stop firing. there you go. And that's what the game would have been. Along each section of floor, you're also supposed to experience the story. That of course ties back into this contacts list. Now you can call people up and get different intel on the enemies from them, stuff like that. And there'd be a series of increasingly strange happenings as you ascend, and a plot would play out where you have to save people that are trapped on certain floors and all that sort of stuff. So there would be cutscenes and things like that, and that would be the main story mode. It takes place during a specific time of day. At some point there was also like cold breath particles and stuff like that, and other things to make the scene different depending on... That's a cool shot. The scene was supposed to be customizable, so after you're done with the story, you can come back and generate your own tower according to your own like specifications and play through custom levels that take place at different times of day and all that stuff. And that's where all these mechanics would really be fun to play around with. So it'd be more of a sandbox type experience at that point. So as you can imagine, all of that was very ambitious, and that's why I never really went back to it. But obviously a lot of the ideas and technology and systems and the whole workflow that this game started exists today in the games that I'm making now, and I wouldn't be where I am without it. So I'm definitely glad I took the time to practice my skills with it, and it's a shame that it never saw anything further, but I'm sure at some point, you know, I've got stories surrounding it that I still want to tell. So I might come back to this idea with a better approach, or I might dance around it, return to this character, maybe, return to some of the surrounding lore that was supposed to be part of this. And everything I do nowadays has benefited from learning what I did and making this project. So after this, I went on to create Iron Reckoning, and that one, thankfully, I saw through to the end. Definitely utilized a lot of the same art style and mechanics and stuff that I learned from here. So if you're interested in playing something in my style, I guess, that was released around the same time as this was supposed to come out, then go check out Iron Reckoning, and definitely let me know what you think about this game and its mechanics and everything that it intended to be. And this is only an overview of what this game was. I have plenty of documents and other logos and stuff that I was building for it. It was supposed to be called BloodFire New Edo, which is a reference to the name of the city that it was supposed to take in, a fictional city. You might find a reference to that city, which was supposed to be here in one of my games, so I'll let you figure that out. So I'd love to talk more about this in the future, maybe go over my design documents or the story or things like that. But for now, I think you get a pretty clear picture of what I was working on and how it influenced my future projects. So that'll be the end of this tale, and the end of looking at this tower. This bane of my existence, because I was so concerned with filling it up with details and layouts, and it's probably for the best that I decided not to. Alright, so I think that closes it out, so thank you very much for watching, and thanks for playing.